To our second daily wrap-up at the end of the second day of Bama Bug Fest on the web, which is the most appropriate for today, I feel like, our name. And so looks like we're live everywhere. We've got some people watching, which is great. So let's go ahead and get started. So I just want to welcome you all to our daily wrap-up and Q&A for Bama Bug Fest on July 9th for Into the Spider-Verse Day. We've been collecting all of your questions and comments about our content throughout the day, and we'll be asking our panel of experts, as you can see here, to help us answer as many as we can. Now, these daily wrap-ups happen every live day of Bama Bug Fest at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're joined this evening by Dr. John Friel, who's the director of the Alabama Museum of Natural History, and Justin Snipes, who is the owner of the Comic Strip comic book store in Tuscaloosa. You might recognize them from programs we've had throughout the day, and they've been kind enough to agree to give us a little bit more of their time, come back this evening for a quick Q&A session. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for helping with the event today, Dr. Friel and Justin. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was a good
How
time.
did it go today? Did you guys like it?
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I've already said earlier that, I love spiders. Dr. Echeverry, our Spidey cosplayer, and Justin did a great job. I mean, it was really good. I learned stuff. I knew most stuff about the spiders, but I actually learned a lot about the comic books, the backstory to Spider-Man and some of his abilities.
That's great. Yeah, so like I said, we've been collecting your comments and your questions throughout the day. For the ones that we didn't get a chance to address in the live portions of it, or for any of the videos that were just uploaded that were recorded beforehand, we've been kind of combing through those comment sections to see if there's anything that we can address here at the daily wrap up. But it is also an opportunity for you to ask us questions live. So if you have any questions while we're talking for this quick little wrap up, go ahead, feel free to put them in the comments. We'll get access to them and pop them on the screen for our experts to take a stab at, or a pedipalp at. No, or anyway, whatever. I'm bad at it. Okay, so but I thought it would be a great way to start. So I think you guys know today we had three things. So we had the drawing session with DC comic artist Sarah Louver that taught you how to draw Spider-Man, and then we had the talk with Justin was on that one. Dr. Echeverry and Spider-Man about how Spider-Man and spiders in real world, how there's crossover. And then we had the 8-legged facts with Dr. John Friel. And then we had Spiderly Speaking with our very own Dr. Ruth this afternoon. And so we asked for that first one, for the drawing session, we asked for people to share their pictures with us. And one of our Bama Bug Fest committee members put together a presentation for us. Do you guys want to see it, to see all of our uploads?
Yep.
Okay, let me go ahead and move my screen over. Okay, can you guys see it okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this one came from Molly. Look at her Spider-Man. It looks so good. The webs on the head, the webs were difficult, I think. And so she has good webbing right there. This one came from Judah. Judah, I believe, is 5 years old.
Is that Judah Hester? Is that the Judah I'm thinking of?
Not the same Judah. I thought the
Okay.
same thing, but it's a different Judah. I think it's Molly's brother, but I'm not sure. And then we got these from the McDonald's from Sylvie, Sipsy, and Kahaba. Look at these beautiful Spideys. Oh, look, and Spidey's even hanging for some trees. Spidey's doing some web slinging on some buildings. I love it. It looks great. We also got this one from Asher, which looks fantastic. And look at that great web in the corner. And then we got this one from Twitter from @TheRealADES. Ades. I'm sorry about that. But I think it looks really great. Look at because I think, if I remember correctly, Justin, you were talking about there being webs in one of the costuming, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the underarm webs. That was part of his original costume.
See, look at that. Some OG Spider-Man right here. And then this came from the Tuscaloosa Public Library. So they have the Spideys that were drawn at the library today, and then some of the Spidey comics that you can find and rent from the Tuscaloosa Public Library.
That's something I didn't know, Allie, that our Tuscaloosa Public Library, in addition to books and CDs and DVDs, they've got comic books as well.
They do. And graphic novels, they've got a really great section. And then that's mine. Look at his little chunky feet. I love his chunky feet. They're so cute. I will say it took me way too long to do this hand, but it came out looking like a hand and not like whatever it was the first time. And then these came from the DC comic. This is Sarah Louver. This is the one who taught us how to draw. So we can definitely see why she's employed by DC Comics. We can see why she is a talented comic book artist. Again, Sarah, if you're listening, thank you so much for this wonderful lesson. If I can do it and I'm only really good at putting googly eyes on things, I think that it was an excellent lesson for everyone. So thank you very much for that. So did John and Justin, did you get a chance to draw today?
I unfortunately didn't have time, Allie. Sorry.
No, I don't.
That's okay. That's okay. You have to go back and do it again, and then you can keep sharing it so our Spideys can be friends.
Sure thing.
This is we showed theirs from Sylvie. She said they had a lot of fun. That we showed her family's ones. They looked great, Sylvie. Thank you. They really were
awesome.
Now, if you enjoyed that, we're going to have one more drawing session with Sarah Louver on Bumblebee, and I'm getting the date real quick. It will be on, I believe it's on, so Tuesday, July 21st at 10 a.m. Sarah Louver will help teach us all how to draw Bumblebee from DC Comics, and it will be wonderful. So keep an eye out for that. There's more drawing to come. I also want to remind everyone that we are, in addition to all this great content, we are also still hosting our art contest, and you can find the form for that on our website on bamabugfest.org. You can find, I'm sorry, you guys, this cat is driving me. Okay, go away. Everyone that's watching, I'm sorry, my cat is very excited about being on the web.
It's a giant spider. People can't see it.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. The giant spider in my room is really excited about being on the web. And is very much wanting to be in the camera. So anyway, and now climbing up the wall. We are hosting the art contest, so please make sure to look on bamabugfest.org to find the submission, and know that we have submission categories from every age, from kindergarten all the way through those who have been out of high school for a little bit or a lot of it. So let's go ahead, though, and kind of get into some of our questions from the day. Some of these are the questions that I just have because it was a really interesting day. They're all going to be interesting days, but I have some questions. But I thought maybe I could start with Justin, if that's okay, and ask you about, it's something that came up. I don't know when it came up. It's something that came up at some point, but I feel like we have to mention that. So this most recent Into the Spider-Verse movie was magical and wonderful and perfect and great and lovely. But there was, I think, the star of the show, Miles Morales is definitely the star of the show, but Peter Porker was in that movie.
Yep. The Spectacular Spider-Ham. He's fantastic.
He was so as someone who's not as familiar with this character, was his portrayal in the movie accurate to his comic book story?
For sure. He was a spider that was bitten by a radioactive ham, who is his Aunt May, who, because of the radioactivity, it messed with her head, so she thinks his loving aunt. He's from a whole universe of the animal characters like that, with like Iron Mouse, Captain America. There's a Fantastic Four villain named Kang the Conqueror in the Spider-Ham universe. It's Kangaroo the Conqueror. And I laughed about that one for a solid 30 minutes. But he's actually the second oldest spider person in that movie. Wow. He was created in the 80s. So Miles is maybe 12 years old. Gwen is probably 8 or 9. Spider-Man Noir is about the same as Gwen. He was my second favorite, but I just love Nick Cage to an unhealthy amount. So
Noir was good, though. Noir was a great character. And I know Dr. Friel recently saw the movie, didn't you?
Yeah, like I said, when we were doing all this programming early on, I was excited about the possibility of involving comic books, but I can confess to Allie and Rebecca, who isn't here right now, but she's really into Supergirl. I know she's plugged in to the comic book community. And I was thinking, this is going to be an interesting interface between science and popular culture. But, since I I was at an early age. I can remember being, in elementary school and actually drawing Spider-Man with my friends. So I went through that phase, but then I got drawn into science and I kind of forgot about it. But this reawakened it in me. So I turned to Allie and Rebecca and I said, where should I go? I mean, I'm so out of the loop. They said, like, well, you should watch Into the Spider-Verse. It's on Netflix now. So I started. It took me a while. Like I never got through it the first time, but once I got through it one time, and then I have a 3-year-old son at home, and I let him watch it. He loves it now. So we've been watching it together. We've all got our favorite scenes. He loves to dance, so it's got such a great soundtrack. And it's within one Spider-Man movie. There's multiple Spider people. So like I said, much like I connected with Peter Porker because he just connects to my childhood experiences watching Looney Tunes and that kind of animation with Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote, big weapons and things like that. Just the silliness of that he exudes.
Oh yeah, I mean, and maybe it's a dream of mine that I know will never come true, but I want to be able to waft through the air on the smells of something delicious,
Maybe just going to Pie Lab or something.
Right. I want to go to Pie Lab and just float on in and then float on out later. I just know that I'm not going to be able to make that happen in life. So it's nice to see that somebody else gets to do that.
I mean, look, with all the advents of modern science, you can never say never.
That's very true. That's very true. So another great thing that John was talking about in his was that there were over 50,000 spider species here. And I just kept thinking about how, I mean, the Spider-Verse already seems pretty extensive. Well, I say extensive, but with 50,000 spider species, I feel like there is just more fodder and more inspiration for potential new spider, universe things. And so I think John had mentioned one of the spiders that I thought was really interesting, and I think he likes a lot too, is the spider that like throws the web over something.
Net casting spiders. And
so, John, can you remind me one more time how the net casting spider thing works? Because I feel like that's superhero material in the making.
Yeah, and again, when I was talking about silk, so they were actually, that's one, and I'll mention one other after but the net casting spider is a really unusual spider. It's one of the spiders that has these really big pair of eyes. So it has incredible vision at night. But what it does with its web, while it builds its web, it really doesn't use it it actually spins a little net that it holds between 4 of its legs, folded up, and then it just waits. And when something crawls on the ground underneath it, it'll throw the net over it, kind of just like in the movies where someone would drop a net out of the trees. That's what it does with this little web. And it also has this trick with flies. It can actually throw it behind its head and catch flies. So it's amazing. If you Google net casting spiders, or ogre spiders is their other name. And while they're not particularly diverse in the U.S., we actually probably have them here in Alabama. I haven't seen them yet, but they're definitely in Florida, and they're probably in the southern part of Alabama. But they're really diverse, like in Australia. A lot of videos you see are the Australia where there's many more species. So that's one way to do it. The other way was the Bolas spider that I mentioned, which we do have here. These are ones that swing a single thread that has a sticky bit on the end to catch moths. So they lure the moths in with chemicals. And then when the moths come close, they swing this kind of bolus, a little piece of silk with a sticky part, and they basically hit the moth with it. And then if they're successful, they lure it in. So they basically fish for moths. So those are 2 behaviors that maybe Spider-Man's already done, but if he hasn't, he needs to.
Do they sound familiar, Justin, for anything you've come across?
The Spidey's used his web in a lot of really neat ways. He's made giant nets to catch falling debris or falling people. He's made parachutes out of it. He's made sort of underwater parachutes where he gets the air bubbles in it so he can swim through pipes and stuff.
That's really cool.
He developed one called impact webbing, which basically is just a giant glob of webbing that hits really hard and takes the guy that he hit it with and sticks him up against a building. Wow. So there's so many different types of webs. It's pretty neat. And his dissolve after 2 hours. So it's just in time for the cops to show up and arrest them.
And environmentally friendly, which is great.
Mentioning the spider that goes underwater, but there's actually a spider that does that. I mentioned in my talk, there's one species of spider that actually lives most of its life underwater, and it literally builds a silk kind of dive bell and it fills with air, and it lives inside that underwater. So again, in some cases, I don't know if Spider-Man or the people behind Spider-Man knew about this, but there is this convergence, and just it gets to the point that silk is incredibly diverse material. There's so many things that real spiders do with it, and so many things that Spider-Man has done with it. So I think it's really one of the superpowers I really got intrigued is one that Miles Morales has, the invisibility. Now, I don't know any spiders that can really be invisible, but there are some spiders that have really good camouflage. And the other one is his like Venom shock ability, which I find really interesting too. I don't know if there's any other analogs to that in the Spideyverse.
No, he was the first one, because Miles was created in an alternate universe from the regular universe, and that version of Peter Parker died, very much similar to the movie. So Miles was bitten by the same sort of spider. It wasn't the same spider, but it's from the same lab, and it affected his DNA differently, which is why he can do the shock and the invisibility. And Spider-Man's powers have fluctuated so many times over the years. There was one point he grew 4 extra arms. It was really weird looking. Another time, he all of a sudden had spikes that came out of his wrists, like stingers.
Wow.
And
weird.
he had the organic webbing for a couple of years. They did that to try and get that synergy with the first movies. So his powers have gone really weird several times. Look up the arm thing, though. That was fun.
Yeah, the arm thing sounds interesting. But in the I'm going to go back to movies just because I feel like a lot of people have seen them. But in maybe it was Endgame, I can't remember. But Tony Stark made him that suit that like had the legs that came out of it. Does anyone remember that? Is that what the leg thing that you're talking about is, or a different actual like organic legs came out of him?
Yeah, no, he was like his mutated, like he started mutating more because he was exposed to radiation. So he grew legitimate extra arms. He had 6 arms total. They were just poking out of his suit.
Wow,
that was the same issue that Morbius the Living Vampire debuted in. So it was a whole weird thing. That was from the 70s.
I bet he went through a lot more deodorant then. So that actually, it's funny because that kind of like kind of works into another question I had, which was about the spider silk. So I think, and John, please tell me if I get this wrong, but you were saying that the spider silk starts out as a liquid in the spider and then comes out as a string solid? Yeah,
there's a lot of research that we're still learning, but there's still lots of mysteries about silk. But in spiders, within the silk glands of the spider, it's in a liquid form, this protein. And then when it's exuded from the spinnerets, it's not necessarily contact with air. From what I understand, it has to do more with the stretching of it, changes some of the physical properties of the material such that it transforms from a liquid to a solid. And spiders produce multiple kinds of silk. Some are sticky, some are not sticky. It generally has some elasticity, very high tensile strength. So spider silk, depending on the spider, and most spiders can produce multiple silks depending on what they're doing it for. And,
it's like they're their own textile factory.
Yeah, some of them have, there's cribate spiders, which actually have an additional structure where they can kind of tease the silk into multiple strands. You can imagine taking a single strand and then having a comb and striking it. You can make it multiple and then twist it up. So they do all kinds of things. You've seen some of the web designs they can come up with. So spiders do a lot of things with silk.
So all they need is a little bit of hairspray and they'll be right in the 80s, right? It's like spider silk all over the place. But I wonder, so that made me wonder, and maybe I just don't know too much about it, but I wonder if Spidey's, like Spider-Man's capsules that he uses for his web slingers are liquid inside and come out as solid, or if it's just like a can of silly string. Like did they ever talk about that you've seen?
Yeah, it starts as a liquid and it just comes straight out of the canister and becomes the different types of webbing that he uses.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at how we're finding all these great parallels between Spidey and the real world Spideys, which is wonderful. I think hopefully by the end of this week, they will be less terrifying to some and more of an interest.
I wonder if there's a phobia to Spider-Man. I never really looked into that to see whether there are people that, they like comic books, but they just can't, they see a Spider-Man comic book and they have to like turn away or.
Arachnoman's phobia, something. That's what I was trying to ask John earlier, if there was, because I'm not afraid of spiders. I don't know, how do you feel about them, Justin? Are you afraid of them?
Nope, don't like them. Yeah. Don't want to be around them.
Oh, you don't want to be around them?
They're awesome. They're super interesting if they're in your room.
Right.
Not in my room. Somebody else's area, that's great. I'll watch it on video, see pictures, as long as they're over there.
That's what I was telling John.
I mean, I was going to ask, I was talking to Rebecca about this earlier, and maybe it was you, Allie, too. You know, I'm fascinated by people's fear of things in the world, natural world. So the most common fears are spiders and snakes. And I have absolutely no fear of either of them. But I have family members that have fears against them. And there's a lot of interest in whether they are, what the basis is. Is it cultural? Is it something we learn? So I'm always fascinated. Sometimes it's a single experience, but I think by and large, within our culture, a lot of it is just conditioning that spiders are portrayed, as being dangerous, evil, somehow doing bad things in culture and literature. I don't know if that's true, outside of Spider-Man. I mean, I'd be curious, like outside of the Spider-Verse, how common spiders are in comic books in general, and if they're ever, good characters. They always kind of associated with the villain.
Most of the spider-themed characters are good guys for the most part. Even like there's a Spider-Man villain named the Tarantula. He started as a villain, but he became a good guy. Black Widow, started as a villain, became a hero. Most of the insect-themed ones end up as heroes, except for the Nazi bee guy.
Which, I mean, I feel like it would have. It just, Anyway.
Yeah, it would take a lot for that one. Yeah.
It would take a lot for that one to make it, yeah. So this is completely out of left field, but I know the characters that we're talking about have all really been based in America, honestly, but I know that there's like international comic things, and I just wonder if there's any, I don't know, insect-themed superheroes from other places in the world. And I don't know if that's something that you've looked into at all, Justin, or John, if you've heard anything.
Well, actually, a lot of the like the superhero comics we have, most of them get translated to most of the other parts of the world. And actually, in Mexico, their Spider-Man comics, roughly mid-'70s, they started diverging. So they would take the art and they would tweak it a little bit and write their own stories. So like his girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, the one that died in 73 or whatever it was, she's married to him, has been this whole time. It's completely different. But
so
it's still
cool.
Spider-Man. Yeah.
That's really neat. I've seen, I think the other day I came across something that was talking about, I don't know, Captain America or something. Anyway, but someone that we're really familiar with being translated to a different, language and a different culture. And I guess I'd never really thought about that before. So it's interesting to see that Spider-Man, I don't know. I think that whole idea is just interesting.
Yeah, my second favorite character in the Spider-Verse was Penny Parker. Again, I didn't know anything about her before that. And I just, her ties to, she's obviously anime based, or whether there's been any takeoff in the anime community with her, whether she might have a parallel universe in anime.
Yeah, well, she actually started in the same little miniseries that Spider-Gwen originated in. And it wasn't a she. And the robot was completely different. They changed so much about that character too. In fact, that character was created by Gerard Way, who was the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, because he also writes comics. Yeah, that was one of his things.
Our world is so connected, like a web,
right?
if you will.
But yeah, so Penny hadn't really showed up much lately. They do have lots of different ones. There's a cowboy Spider-Man whose horse wears a mask, and someone asked him, "Why is your horse wearing a mask?" And he said, "So no one knows who he is." And that was my favorite moment in that whole series that happened. But there's like any Spider-Man thing you can think of. I can think of 30 variants of Spider-Man just from the Spider-Verse right now because they keep making them.
See, that just makes me
really
so
a Spider-Man
happy.
Christmas album? Is that just something that exists in the movie?
The Christmas album is from the movie, but they did release on two separate occasions. There was one book that came with its own album that had the Spider-Man theme song from the 60s cartoon. And then there was another one in the 90s that came with a cassette of the Ramones covering that song.
Oh, wow. Allie, note, at our next holiday party, we need to play some Spider-Man Christmas tunes.
I actually want to run. I didn't even think about it. It's not that, but I have on vinyl. I have a Spider-Man Green Goblin comic, like a reading of a Spider-Man comic on vinyl that I listen. I also have a Batman one that I listen to sometime, and it's like a radio play, but it's the comics, and it's
awesome.
It's incredible. It's not the singing. I mean, the Christmas album would be much better, but this is a close second, I think. Oh, I meant to bring that down. It's upstairs. Anyway, so kind of not related, but a little. So John, we had talked about in the drawing one, we had talked about the webs on Spidey's costume, on his, I say costume, I think uniform. What are we calling this? Uniform, costume,
outfit is generally what they go with. Yeah.
Okay.
Or suit.
Thank you. Suit.
Work
Suit's
attire.
even better. Work attire. His professional. This is his professional office attire. So we're talking about the webbing lines.
It's also his PPE. You know, in this times of Corona.
Do you think he has a filter in there?
He probably does now.
He probably does now. Although I'm not gonna lie, it would be a little funny if he had like an N95 mask on top of his other mask. I think it'd be funny. So we were talking about, I'm just going to show mine because it's right here. We were talking about the lines, right? And somebody was asking, Sarah she was like the curvy line because she couldn't, but we were asking if there's like words to describe the anatomy of a spider web. And have you ever heard of anything like that?
There actually are. Again, I'm not a professional arachnologist.
Right.
But I know I've seen their technical illustrations because sometimes spiders can be identified, at least initially, or there are trends. Certain families of spiders make certain types of webs. So usually what you see portrayed is a stylized orb weaver.
Right.
So orb weavers have these kind of radial, I think they might be called radial spokes, but that's what I would call them, that come out from the center. And then there are these kind of concentric rings around it. And that together makes the typical, what we think of as a spider web, is the one you see for Halloween decorations. And that is, people have been studying that evolutionarily, whether that's a primitive trait, whether it's something that's more derived, because some of the most primitive spiders don't really build any webs. And then other spiders like black widows and our common house spiders, they just make a mess of webs. There really is no pattern to it. But what's really cool about the orb weavers are they build those on like a daily basis. And I've actually been in Tuscaloosa. I remember one time I was up at the Hotel Indigo bar overlooking the Black Warrior River. I was out there having a drink with my wife, and I noticed there was an orb weaver. This is right about dusk. It was making its web, and I watched it. And in the course of about 20 minutes, it had no web built, but it built the entire web. And just watching it do it was just fascinating. It was oblivious to me. It's just like, for him, it was just like, okay, it's time to go to work. I need to set up my web because I got to get some food. And he would make the little, they usually make a line across the top, and they come down and start doing some of the spokes. And once the spokes are in, they start in the center and then do this concentric circle. So if you actually see a real spider web, those horizontal lines are all connected eventually till they get to the outside. And then sometimes at the end of the night, as Sebastian mentioned, silk is really expensive. So the spiders will actually recycle it. They'll eat their own web sometimes. And sometimes they're just one use, they get torn down. So it's neat that it's in there, and everyone recognizes it. I don't think if you show someone a spider web, they're going to know what that is. They might not know it's Spider-Man's costume, but they're going to recognize it as a spider web.
It sounds like spiders are in the construction business, always and always and always.
Yeah, they definitely are.
So actually, that brings me to one of my favorite facts about spiders, which is where spiders liquefy their food and then slurp it up, right? Like spider Slurpees, always Slurpees. They were the original juicers. And I wrote a couple of terrible popsicle stick humor thoughts about this, and I would like to read them to you now. So I would say spiders are the original juicers, and that it brings a new meaning to a juice cleanse. It was good, right? It was good. You can see more of that at our stand-up special, which I will tell you about later. But can you talk just a little bit more about that again, John? It's like the coolest thing.
Yeah. So, one of the things I like to I was often contrasting because, a lot of people, again, I don't know if you're going to ask me about spiders and insects, hint, hint, but, that's a nice distinction I like to make. And, if you've ever watched, a praying mantis eat or a grasshopper, I mean, insects most of them have, most of them, or some of them at least, have mandibles where they can physically chew, like a caterpillar. A caterpillar chews up a leaf. So those have the ability to eat solid food, pass it through them, poop it out the other end. Spiders, on the other hand, they really aren't set up to chew things. I mean, they have those little tiny teeth at the base of the chelicerae, so they can kind of mash things up, but it's more kind of making a mush. They basically have to, as I think I described it, vomit up some digestive juices into their prey item, let it steep for a little bit, let it do its magic, and then maybe massage it a little bit with those chelicerae teeth, and then basically suck it back into their bodies as a Slurpee or however you want to do it, your slushy. So that's how they do it. And you think about it, and they leave the husk behind. So often you'll look at a spider web, you often see just the exoskeletons of things it's eaten. Sometimes they're wrapped up in silk. And often they'll catch them, they'll wrap them up in silk, and then they'll do all this digestive business.
See, juice cleanse. The thing that they ate got completely cleansed. There's nothing left in it. And then it just gets left. Hey, John, we should, well, first off, before that, I wonder if there's been any, I'm assuming digestive juices have not featured heavily in the comics when we talk about Spider-Man, but has there ever been, okay, good. Has he gone to Smoothie King a lot? Like, is there that involved or?
No.
Okay. Well, that's probably for the best. If you guys are writing Spider-Man comics, please maybe don't include digestive juices to neutralize your prey.
I like that in the multiverse because they actually showed at least one of the Spider-Man eating. Normally you don't see him eating at all. Again, it's like the same way with going to the bathroom. I mean, I don't know if that's ever dealt with in Spider-Man comics or the movies.
Oh yeah, no, sure is. Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, he talks about how irritating.
If I had to wear Spider-Man's costume, I can imagine it's going to be inconvenient when nature calls.
He's mentioned that. Yeah.
My favorite, going back to Spider-Verse, but my favorite scene or like montage or whatever is when Peter B. Parker is like eats a lot and gets really out of shape and it like cries in the shower, and just that whole montage it cracks me up every time I watch it. But then he pulls it back together, but then he's in sweatpants and I think it's okay. Anyway, but so John, we should talk about spiders and insects. Spiders versus insects.
Yeah, so I mentioned in my, since this is the Bama Bug Fest, I mean, a lot of the facts we've been talking about are kind of universal, global in nature. But I was like, we're in Alabama. This is our state's bug. We are the only bug festival in Alabama. So we need to celebrate our local diversity, biodiversity, our local spiders. And I just love when something is a little more local. I know it's an insect, but I know Allie loves the cotton boll weevil. It's something that we talk about a lot because we have a monument in our state to an insect. Not one for a spider, but maybe we can start a petition. Maybe one of these. But anyhow, there was something recently in the news. So I'm always Googling and I'm really active on social media about spider things. And someone posted something that I didn't believe at first. They basically said, it's a blog post saying that an Alabama court has ruled that spiders are in fact insects. So I followed it and read the blog post and had a link to the actual court document. It was the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Alabama held that in this case, in fact, in a legal sense, they were deciding that spiders were in fact insects. And this struck me as really odd, but it's not unusual. Sometimes science doesn't always match up with legal terms. And what the backstory is really interesting. So what happened in this case was, there was a homeowner in Alabama who had a home that they claimed was infested with brown recluse spiders. So this is one of the few spider species in Alabama which is medically significant. If you do get bitten, which is exceedingly rare, you're not going to die, but you may get an ulceration, may have some kind of medical condition as a result. So they bought this home, and when they moved in, they had what they thought was an unusual number of these spiders. And they wanted their insurance company to pay out for it. And they had a homeowner's policy like most people that own homes do. But when you read the fine print, often there are exemptions, against acts of God and things like that. And specifically in their insurance policy, it states that they weren't responsible for damage due to insects. But their claim was, but wait, spiders are arachnids. Well, they're arthropods, they're not insects. Insects are hexapods, six-legged, they're completely unrelated. And as Sebastian pointed out, or acknowledges today, they're as closely related to, or spiders are as closely or less closely related to insects than we are to sharks. Things like that. It's been so long evolutionarily, over 500 million years that they've been separated. So from a science point of view, it's black and white. Spiders aren't insects. They share some common features, but they've been separated so long. But technically in Alabama, if you have an insurance policy that mentions insects and the damage is done by spiders, you're at a loss. So I have to go back. I actually haven't checked my homeowner's policy to see whether I've got that exemption there. But I thought that was just really interesting because it happens a lot in biology. I remember a few years ago, I studied fishes, and there was a whole argument about what could be called a catfish, whether a catfish was just a channel catfish, which we commercially farm here in Alabama, or was it the same catfish to me, or there's thousands of species of them. But there are some that are produced in agriculture overseas that were being sold in the U.S. as catfish, and U.S. catfish farmers didn't like it, so they lobbied their legislatures, and they basically had the federal government define what a catfish was for at least sale. So if you buy something labeled as catfish in Publix or a supermarket in your neighborhood, it's going to be channel catfish. The imported ones are often sold as swai, which is a different family of catfishes, but they can't call them catfish. So this is a very analogous situation, but in this case with spiders and insects. And it only happened back in May, so it's a relatively recent news. I don't think a lot of people know about it. I mean, I don't know what the long-term repercussions would be, but I just thought that was just, that's Alabama in a nutshell.
I shared the link to the article that you talked
great.
about in the comment section so people can get a chance to read it for themselves. Okay, guys. Well, I think we have had a pretty good and thorough wrap up. So I think we might have to wrap up our wrap up if that's okay with you. But I do want to mention that, Justin had talked about in the 2:00 one, how if people were interested in learning more about Spidey, like where they could get started. But I wanted to ask you, since you are the owner of the comic strip, are you guys open right now for people to come visit you if they're in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, we're open Monday through Saturday.
Okay, excellent.
Mondays from 1 to 7, and Tuesday through Friday from 11 to 7, and Saturday from 10 to 7. But I'm usually here at 10 a.m. every day because I don't have the ability to sleep late anymore.
Okay, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm assuming, actually, I've been there, so I know the answer. But you got lots of great Spidey content, and then other content too. People are looking for some stuff. But a great way, if you are in the Tuscaloosa area or happen to pass through the Tuscaloosa area and are interested in finding some comics, please visit the comic strip. And then also, just say hi to Justin when you're there, because it sounds like he'll be there, maybe.
I'm here more than I'm at home, so yeah.
See, yeah, there you go. Okay, does anyone have any other final parting thoughts for today before I go into our little spiel to wrap up our wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like I said, everything's on YouTube, so you can go back and watch it. I know I'm going to rewatch the Dr. Russo. I've already watched it twice and have to watch it again because Mary Beth, who was a co-worker of Allie and I's at UA Museum, she's a semi-professional thespian. She loves to act, and we suggested that she just leapt into it. She's like, I'll do it. And
that was all her idea, and she ran with it. So she ran with it.
And the fact that she talks about at the beginning Norm Platnick, who was a recently deceased arachnologist, probably the most productive spider expert in the world. He described hundreds of species. Passed away earlier this spring, and she actually worked for him briefly, illustrating spider genitalia for his illustration. So that part in that is the absolute truth. She did that earlier in her career. She's worked at the American Museum in New York, the Field Museum in Chicago, and now she's here with us now in Tuscaloosa.
See, the things you learn. It's the more you know, sort of, if I need the rainbow to come across sort of situation. Okay, well, great. Justin, any parting words from you?
Only that the Nazi B character is the middle of the road weird. So if you want to hear more weird, you know where to go. Yep.
Go visit that guy. He can help. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all again for joining us today for Bama Bug Fest on the web. Make sure to check us out on Saturday, July 11th. We will have our Bug Meets World A Walk in the Woods day, and we will have content at 10 to 4, and then the daily wrap up again at 7. And remember, all these times are Central Standard Time. If you aren't able to join us for any of the live presentations at the time that they happen, you can always go back and watch them later. They're all archived on our social media sites and YouTube channels. And then also check out the handy resource guide, which you can find at bamabugfest.org. That has more resources. If you would like to delve deeper into some of these topics, it has places where you can access all these extra resources to get some more information. So as always, we want to thank UA Museums, the Warner Transportation Museum, the Alabama Museum of Natural History, Department of Research and Collections, UA Rogers Library, and the Tuscaloosa Public Library for all of your work in organizing this event. And we want to thank our guests, Dr. John Friel and Justin Snipes. Thank you guys so much for your time here today. We appreciate you sharing some of your time and expertise with us. And we look forward to, I think we're going to see both of you some more for Bama Bug Fest. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll be back.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'll be back.
So thank you all again. I hope everyone has a great night. And yeah, think of spiders, draw them. Be one with the spiders. They're okay. All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, Allie. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.